Hello, students, and welcome to another edition of Mr. Marcasa's Remote Lessons. And this remote lesson is dedicated to my 7th grade social studies class. We are working on 2-column notes for pages 716 through 721, and this one is about the cultures of East Asia. So in your 2-column notes, you guys have different categories of information you're taking 2-column notes on, and for obvious reasons, most of the notes for this section will go under cultures, because culture is one of your categories. So remember, whatever I've highlighted up on this video lesson, make sure you have down in your notes. So let's go and talk about the date line real quick. It says Beijing, China, July 12th, 2001. Today, Beijing won its bid to host the 2008 Summer Olympics. The announcement set off a celebration of fireworks, songs, and flag waving by thousands of people. One student shouted into a television camera, "Hello world, we are the Chinese people." This is the first time that China, the world's most populous country, has been selected to host the Olympics. The historic decision begins a new era for the Chinese. They now feel recognized and accepted by the world community. So the reason why this is so important is because for the longest time, China especially has been a country that's been mainly about isolation, staying apart from the rest of the world in terms of culture, economies, as well as government. Throughout the 20th century, however, this has slowly changed over China's history, and we're going to learn about some of the cultural exchange that has continued to exist between both between the world as well as China, and also a lot of East Asian countries as well. So let's go and talk about cultural exchange real quick. So cultural exchange has occurred for centuries among the countries of East Asia. In recent decades, these countries have been influenced by Western culture as well. At the same time, aspects of East Asian cultures have spread outside the region. So because of there's been a lot of cross-cultural taking place as well. We'll talk a little bit about that more in detail. International events like the Olympics are sure to generate more awareness of the region around the world. So as more time goes on, the more interconnected the world becomes, especially nowadays, especially with things like the internet, especially with digital technology, has really made cultural exchange really, really important for the world for the most part. So let's go and talk about this real fast. So exchange within East Asia. Let me go and zoom out a little bit so we can see it better. So East Asian cultures have much in common because of cultural exchange. All right, so that's the reason why we see that. Many of these shared aspects of culture originated in China, whose civilization had already existed for about 4,000 years. For example, the Japanese and Koreans adapted Chinese writing system for their own languages. So that's why their writing systems look very similar. The Japanese also adopted Chinese ideas about centralized government, urban planning, and painting techniques. Similarly, Koreans picked up Chinese printing techniques and methods of government administration. So because of that, there was a lot of exchange within these countries that kind of influenced each other, primarily China being the main influencer in this part of the world as well. Now, when it comes to religion, the religion of East Asia are strong indicators of cultural exchange within the region. Buddhism, for example, originated in India. All right, so that religion is not native to China or the Koreas or to Japan as well. The Chinese learned about the religion some around 1,700 years ago. They then passed their understanding of it to the Koreans, who later transmitted their knowledge to the Japanese. Some of the elements of Buddhism that the Japanese adapted were incorporated in their native Shinto religion. The Koreans and Japanese also developed interest in Confucianism. It too spread from China to their countries. Practices today. Throughout East Asia, many people still practice Buddhism and Confucianism. They also practice other religions such as Christianity and Taoism. The Communist government of North Korea discourages their religious freedom. South Koreans, however, practice Buddhism and Christianity. Mongol practice Tibetan Buddhism. Taiwan's dominant religion is based on Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism. And Japan's two major religions are Zen Buddhism and Shinto. Now, you might be wondering, well, Mr. Ricasa, why is North Korea so big on the whole discouraging of freedom of religion? The reason why is because North Korea is a communist nation, and a lot of communist nations, one of the tenets of a communist government is that there is no religion at all. The communist governments do not believe in religion, and therefore they don't believe in religious freedom because you should not be practicing religion, period. And that's what they feel for the most part in a communist government. So that's the reason why that is the case. So as you guys can see here, let me go and clear off my annotations here. So you can see on this map that kind of shows you the different cultural exchanges that have taken place throughout history as well. All right, you can start seeing how they kind of impact each other in this region as well as the West as well. And if you guys don't believe me, you guys can also see that taking place exceptionally well here for the United States. For example, Korean pop music, known as K-pop, is quite popular currently right now. All right, and that's because it's from Korea. Why? Because of cultural exchange. Anime, manga from Japan, exactly the same thing. You're starting to see a lot of cultural exchange, and that's just with entertainment just by itself, let alone food, music, influences, religions, all kinds of stuff has been cross-culturally exchanged over time. So now we have here arts past and present. Like religion, the arts forms of East Asian countries reflect cultural exchange. For example, similar methods of painting and making poetry are used throughout the region. However, each country also boasts unique artistic traditions. Art in China. Chinese art forms date back thousands of years. The art of bronze casting was developed around 1100 BC. Music and dance are also ancient art forms in China. Many different forms of instruments have been found in ancient tombs. Bells, flutes, drums, and stringed instrument called a zither are still played in China. Fine porcelain dishes and vases are among China's greatest art treasures. The scenes, designs, and words that decorate them have also developed helped historians understand cultural life in ancient China. For example, you might see this where people use porcelain in their dinnerware, and what they call it fine china, because that's where it came from originally. Today, theater is a popular art form in China. There are at least 300 forms of traditional opera in China. At the Beijing Opera, actors wear elaborate costumes before dramas based on Chinese stories, folklore, as well as history. So moving on now, we go to art in Japan. Buddhist ideas have influenced the arts in Japan. Artists consider simplicity, delicacy, and tradition to be important in their artwork. Painting, printing, dance, music, and theater all reflect these ideas. In literature, the haiku is a world-famous form of Japanese poetry. Each haiku uses only 17 syllables. The goal of the form is to suggest in a short description much more than is stated. Many Japanese poets, such as Basho, have written haiku since the form was developed hundreds of years ago. Now, let's talk about haiku really quick. Haiku is actually kind of interesting. Haiku is a type of Japanese poetry that consists of 3 sentences. One sentence has 5 syllables. The second sentence has 7 syllables. And the third sentence has 5 syllables again. And that is all you get to make the haiku, all right? Now, you might be wondering, well, Mr. Casa, why would anyone want to write a haiku this way? The reason why, I forgot the name of the individual. What ended up happening, there was a samurai warrior who was about to die. He was going to die through ritualistic suicide. And before he died, he wrote a poem, all right? Basically, he was talking about looking at cherry blossoms, how like these cherry blossoms, which are beautiful blossoming flowers, are on cherry trees. He was looking at it. He basically wrote a short poem about how he felt about them before he died. Well, when the emperor and the shogun at that time period, when they read his poem, they were so moved by it that they basically decided that it was like a national treasure type of thing. And what they ended up finding out is that that's what he did. His first sentence had 5 syllables in it. His second sentence had 7 syllables in it. And his last sentence had 5 syllables in it as well. And so because of that, that basically established the idea of haiku, all right? And haiku is a thing that you could do in no matter what language you use, which is actually kind of interesting. In fact, Mr. Mikasa actually wrote a haiku. Here's Mr. Mikasa's haiku right here. It's about our current situation. As you can see, I got 3 sentences. The first sentence has 5 syllables. The second one has 7. The third one has 5 as well. So the class is silent. COVID-19 strikes again. Classes are remote. Whoa. So you can see it there, conveys a lot of emotion in a very few span of words, all right? Thus the power of haiku. And no, you may not copy this. This is my personal one. If you try to publish it as your own, I will sue you. I'm just joking. That's not going to happen. Okay, so moving on. It says some artists in Japan are working to preserve traditional crafts. Potters, weavers in particular, receive money from the Japanese government so that they can continue their work and teach others. These artists are considered living treasures. So moving on. So culture and communism. Communism has significantly affected some of East Asia's cultures. That goes without a saying. In North Korea and China, the communists repress artistic freedom. Because in communism, they can do that. During the Cultural Revolution in China, artwork was frequently damaged or destroyed. Writers were forced to create propaganda instead of expressing their own ideas. Propaganda is basically where you're creating artwork to support your government. That's pretty much what it is. Even Mao, who was the guy who was the chairman Mao, wrote poetry, but his poems only concerned communist ideals. Playwrights and painters who created work that reflected communist ideals were allowed to continue their work. Artists who used their art to criticize the government were punished. In North Korea today, government still controls the work of artists. The Chinese government has also shown greater willingness to allow artists to pursue their own ideas. So now we move on to the Chinese people. China contains about 1/5 of the world's population. Most people in China belong to the ethnic group known as the Han. In addition, there are about 55 minority groups within Japan. Each has its own language, spoken language, and some also have their own written language. In school, students often speak their native language, and Mandarin Chinese is taught as the official language. So we start seeing a lot of that taking place in that part of the world as well. And lastly, changes to family. The Chinese have traditionally lived in large, extended families. To slow down population growth, the Chinese government decreed in the 1980s that each married couple in a city may only have one child. Rural families may be allowed to have a second child, and families and ethnic minorities may have more than one child. Most Chinese households today are made up of small family units that may include grandparents. Family members in China depend on one another and follow traditional patterns, and family elders are greatly respected. Children, because there are so few, are given lots of attention. In the past, marriages were arranged by parents, but that is no longer common. In present-day China, most parents work outside the home, so grandparents often care for their children. So there you guys have it. That is the notes for 2-column notes for you guys' culture notes for pages 716 to 721. As always, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to email me or send me a message on Schoology, and I'll get back to you guys as quickly as possible. That's good for this one, you guys. We will catch you guys on the next one.